Welcome everybody to this lesson, HTML form attribute. In the previous lesson, we talked about the HTML form. We looked at how we create an HTML form. In this lesson, we are just going to be specific and talk about the HTML form attributes. So we are going to be looking at these attributes or some of the attributes that we can use on the HTML form. The very first one that we are going to be looking at will be the action attribute. And the action attribute defines action to be performed when the form is submitted. And usually, this is how you want the the server to handle the data. So we are going to have the form submitting data to an action page, which will be a backend, maybe PHP, Angular, Python, whatever the backside and technology is. So that's what the action uh, is used for. So it's generally that the backside page will have some scripting, right? Some whatever language is in is going to have a script that's going to handle the form data that has been submitted to that particular page. So that is the action attribute, and we saw that in the previous lesson. The next form attribute is the target attribute, and the target attribute specifies where the response that is received after submitting the form should display, right? And a couple of values that we have is the blank, the self. The blank simply means that the response is displayed in a new window or a new tab, right? So that's what the blank is. The self is saying that display the response in the current window, right? And then the parent is displayed in a parent frame, right? And the top is the response is displayed in the full body of the window. So those are the various ones that values that you can use with the target attribute. The next one is the method attribute. And the method attribute specifies the HTTP method to be used when submitting the form. So the form data can be sent as URL variables, right, with a method that we can define as either get, right, or post, right. And so when submitting data, you can use the get or post, right? You typically want to return a response when you use the get post. You necessarily don't need to return anything. You just want to submit the data, right? So we'll be looking at all of this. And the fourth one is the autocomplete attribute. And the autocomplete attribute defines whether the form has autocomplete turned on or off. When autocomplete is on, the browser automatically complete values based on values that the user has entered before, right? And when it's off, it doesn't do that. So that is the autocomplete attribute. The last one is the no validate attribute, and this attribute defines whether the form data should or should not be validated when submitted, right? So it specifies that the form data should not be validated when submitted. It's a Boolean um, value, and so when you have it in there, when it's present, it specifies that the data that you have in there should not be validated when submitted. So we already have a previous example. We're going to still use the same example. we talked about the action attribute, right? And just so you know, the action attribute defines the action to be performed. So if I submit this, you can see here there's nothing that is being handled, right? But you can see here in the header, it sends your F name Matthew, L name Smith as part of the URL. So the handler would get these values and then perform an action and maybe return a value. So I just wanted to show you what that is, right? Let's look at a target. So with a target, all I need to do is add a target attribute, and I'm going to set this to underscore blank, right? So then if I refresh this and I submit this, it's supposed to open this or return this to a new, the response is supposed to be a new page or a new tab or a new window, right? So if I submit it, you can see that it returned it into a new uh, tab here, right? But let's say we wanted to use self. If I refresh this and I submit this, you can see that it returned a response in the current tab or the current window. So with the method attribute, and we are not probably gonna be able to visualize this, but just to show you, we can use get, and if I refresh this, you would see that it's gonna show the values in the URL. So you can see the URL has the values, right? And if I use the post, you would not see it. And let me close this, refresh this, and so in here you don't see the values, right? So that is the only difference. But the post and the get are both methods that you can use to send your data. So let's look at the autocomplete attribute. So and maybe let me just drop this down to create space. So autocomplete, and I'm gonna set this to on, right? So if I refresh this, I expect that the browser will try to complete. So if I just type I already have a history M, so it tries to complete, help you out, right? So that's what the auto complete is. But if I set this to off, autocomplete is equal to off. If I try though, you don't see any completion, right? So that is the attribute autocomplete. So finally, with the no validate attribute, to do that, I want to just create an email input, and I'm going to put in input, and then I'm going to type the type of this input as email, and I'm going to set an ID as email, and I'm going to put a name. Again, that's very important, as email. And then I would, should I put an, okay, maybe a label. Let's add a label to this and put in email, right? And let's target this for email, all right? So yeah, what did I just do? I could correct that. Okay, for email. So maybe enter email. Good. So we have this, right? Now, if I refresh this, I have my email, and maybe I need to break this. Let's make it neater. If I refresh this, we have this, right? So with the no validate, right, it tells the browser not to validate this, right? So we don't want to have any validation. Right now, if I enter just any value and I try to submit, you see it tells you that you need an at in the email address. It's missing all this, so it doesn't even do anything, right? It is doing the validation. So in order to prevent this, or to me, I don't know why anybody would want to, but you have to add the no validate. So let's just do it. I have my autocomplete off. So now I can add no validate. Oops, no validate. So now if I do this and I try to submit it, it it goes, right? So that is the no validate. So we talked about various form attributes in this lesson. We looked at some examples and how these examples work. So I think we still have a lot, some that we didn't talk about. Example will be the rel, encrypts, accept cassette, all that, right? So that you can read about, but this one is a good starting base for you. So thanks for watching and see you in the next lesson.